They are awarded Illinois' highest honor, the Order of Lincoln. A pioneer on Broadway and in talking pictures. A corporate fundraiser for the arts. The astrophysicist who discovered black holes in space. A pioneer in preserving endangered animals. One of the nation's leading creators of public sculpture. And a business leader who raises millions for social service groups. They come from different worlds, but they share a distinctive honor. Abraham Lincoln's legacy was honesty, service, and sacrifice. In his name, the Lincoln Academy of Illinois honors excellence. The Lincoln Academy has only one purpose: to honor individuals for their contributions to the betterment of mankind, either as native or adopted residents of Illinois. There is no other like it in any other state. Those who are selected, the Lincoln Laureates, can tell us much about excellence and how to achieve it. The Lincoln Academy has met in ceremonies like this one every year since 1965. Who are the members of the Academy? They are the presidents of Illinois' four-year universities and citizens selected from throughout Illinois by the governor, who is the Academy's president. The Academy is non-political, not-for-profit, and self-supporting. It receives no government funds. For decades, it has sought to recognize the best of Illinois, generations of excellence.
Born in Texas, Etta Moten Barnett is nominated a Lincoln Laureate in the category of the performing arts. She has brought honor to her adopted state and benefited humanity through pioneering roles in the movies, Broadway, and her work as a worldwide goodwill ambassador and as a civic and cultural activist in the city of Chicago. The daughter of a minister, she is blessed with a singing voice that has been used to inspire individuals who must overcome cultural and ethnic prejudices. Her talents enabled her to capture singing and dancing roles that were credited with breaking down racial barriers for black performers, both on Broadway and ultimately in Hollywood. I present to you, as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy, Etta Moten Barnett, whose talents, courage, and civic contributions are an inspiration to all of us here in Illinois.
It was 1933. Talking movies were only 6 years old. Hollywood was anxious to provide relief for audiences in the depths of the Depression. The Gold Diggers of 1933 featured some young hopefuls named Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler, and a singer new to the silver screen.
You shouted here hooray, but look at him today. Remember my forgotten man.
Remember My Forgotten Man was a scene where the returned soldier who had come back from, the soldiers that had come back from the First World War, and FDR was the president, and he said, if I am reelected, I will remember the forgotten man.
You sang for FDR at the White House.
Yes. Mrs. Roosevelt invited me to come and on his birthday. I did a small concert, including some Negro spirituals.
She was the first black female singer to be invited to sing for FDR at the White House. And she sang again in the movies in 1933 in Flying Down to Rio. This was the film in which the world first met the dance team of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. The movie featured one of the longest dance production numbers in history, based on a song called The Karaoke. One of the singers was Etta Moten.
It's not a foxtrot or a polka. You're gonna dream of a new karaoke. It's seen as a kiss on the fire.
This time, Etta received screen credit for her work as the colored singer. One of her granddaughters reflects on what that role meant for Etta and for black performers.
She was one of the first people to be able to have a character that wasn't a maid or a servant. And she tells the story that when she was doing it, she was just doing a job. But the world looked at that and had a very different impression. In Chicago, she tells the story in the Regal Theater, which is moved now. But when they show Flying Down to Rio, it was Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, starring Etta Moulton Barnett. You know, so I mean the appeal that she had to the public at that time was very historical and very, very important and significant.
This divorced mother of 3 daughters had put herself through the University of Kansas, earned a teaching certificate, and a classical music education. She traveled to Broadway and, unlike most new singers, started winning parts that brought her the notoriety that opened doors on both coasts. Among her fans, George Gershwin, who was working on a new folk musical called Porgy and Bess.
Gershwin said that the part was for me, but he wrote it too high for anybody but a soprano. And when I sat on the piano stool with him and he played the part of Bess for me, I said, you know, I can't sing that. That's too high. And then furthermore, we're not bad in soprano. We're bad in contralto. But he said, this is opera. That was his dream.
Etta did not open Bess on Broadway, but she did take it on the road for 3 years with the original cast, coast to coast, including Chicago, where she was once again a huge critical success, and where she had met a new husband.
In 1947, my husband and I traveled in Africa. I was married to Claude Barnett, the head of the Associated Negro Press of America, who's now passed away. It was during colonial days, and we found that Africa was seething for freedom and for independence.
In her life, Etta Moulton Barnett, the daughter of a Kansas minister, has been on the leading edge of social change. She's still active, especially in encouraging young people.
We must encourage those who have achieved excellence. We talk about the bad ones and those who are delinquent and those who have are prejudiced against each other, and that's on both sides, both races are prejudiced against each other, and that they must realize that they're in an integrated world, in a diverse world, and we've got to get along with everybody that's in this world, because we're going to all touch at some place in life. As long as I live, and as long as my life lasts, I shall try to make a difference and keep trying as long as I live. And this I promise.
Born in West Point, Mississippi, John H. Bryan is nominated as a Lincoln Laureate in the category of the arts. He has brought honor to Illinois through his accomplishments in promoting the arts and diverse cultural activities. He believes art is of great importance because it is a permanent statement and reflection of our communities, our times, and our lives. He believes that corporations, their executives, and their employees should be actively involved in community affairs. John H. Bryan, patron of the arts and community leader.
John Bryan is accustomed to ceremonies like this one. He has received the French Legion of Honor and Holland's Order of Orange-Nassau. As with the Order of Lincoln, he is chosen not for his stewardship of a worldwide food and clothing company, but rather for his willingness to invest corporate resources in the arts.
I have, in fact, long expressed the view that a successful corporation must share both its financial resources and its and its people in volunteer activity with the not-for-profit sector. I also have a firm conviction that those of us in positions of business leadership really cannot be successful people without a measure of service to our community. These views, if not universally held, are most certainly encouraged by the American tradition of philanthropy and volunteerism, traditions that make us so fortunate, I think, to be Americans.
John Bryan is an avid art collector, and he has seen to it that his company is a generous art supporter. Its donations to art are about 3 times that of the average corporation.
What kind of barriers, if any, did you have to overcome, or do business people in your position have to overcome to get stockholders and boards of directors and so on to say, yes, it's a good thing, let's go ahead and spend this
Only
money?
barrier we have to overcome is the one we should overcome, and that is providing the successful financial performance for the shareholders. That's the entrance fee. I'm perfectly aware that if we're not a successful company, we do not have a right to share our resources to the extent we do as a successful company. That's not something I established. It's something that's sort of established in the ethic of how American business is conducted.
And it's all legitimate?
Oh, very legitimate sort of thing to do. Well, why not? You're just getting 2 for 1 in that, I think. Obviously, you can do it in a gauche way and lose, but I'm making the assumption that you know how to do it, how to tactfully put your name on an art exhibit or a symphony performance or an opera production or something, and how to encourage your employees to attend a function, give them the opportunity to do that. Sports marketing is a part of our life today. Why not marketing? And you could do it with the social agencies, too. Mm-hmm. We insist on all of our employees serving on the boards of social agencies. That's a benefit that they get. It's a benefit we get as a corporation. And we back them and give them contributions to serve on those agencies. The agencies are benefiting, the corporation is benefiting.
John Bryan's leadership in corporate support for the arts made the headlines in March when he personally led the way on a $100 million matching grant for new construction at Chicago's Orchestra Hall, which serves the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and here at the Civic Opera House, home to the Lyric Opera. He calls it an investment in Chicago. Good business. What makes the deal unique is that the money will come from corporate operating funds, not philanthropic funds.
What does it say about you when you can basically go to lunch with a couple of friends and pull together that kind of an understanding?
It says a lot less about me than it does the Chicago business community. Because there are not many business communities where that sense of civic responsibility exists as it does in Chicago. Chicago is the 2nd largest business community in America. New York is the largest. New York is over different industries in different states and all. Without question, Chicago is the best one. And this is the illustration of it, that $100 million can be gotten together for a civic project. This is not philanthropic money. This is money that they're investing in Chicago because they know that the city in which they have their headquarters is so terribly important to their ability to employ people and to keep the city alive and viable and vital. I've spoken about the educational and the civilizing and the creative contributions that art makes to society as a whole. But if I am called upon to cite one overriding reason why art is important to me, I would turn to the timeless and the eternal quality of art. People, you see, and also the corporations they build, are really quite fragile things. And today, even the ideas we have and the values we hold are often highly disposable. But through the ages, the art that we create stands. It stands as the lasting signature of our time.
Thank you very much, John Bryan.
Born in Lahore, India, Dr. Chandrasekhar is nominated as a Lincoln Laureate in the category of science. He has brought honor to his adopted state through his accomplishments and achievements, which have increased humanity's understanding of the stars, outer space, and our physical universe. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for his development for Chandrasekhar's limit, an astrophysical theory that for the past half-century has contributed to our studies of the stars and the universe. The theory refuted the scientific notion of the times, which said all stars, after burning up their energy, became small, very dense, and hot bodies known as dwarf stars. The Chandrasekhar limit says, however, that stars with a mass greater than 1.4 times the Sun do not become white dwarfs, but rather develop into dense neutron stars. And even larger stars, after burning their energy, became part of what is now known as black holes in space. Governor Edgar, I present to you as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy, Dr. Chandrasekhar, truly a star and guiding light to our universe of scientists.
Stockholm, Sweden, 1983. King Carl Gustaf presents the Nobel Prize to Subramanian Chandrasekhar, the theoretical astrophysicist of the University of Chicago. At the age of 73, Chandra is honored for work he did more than 5 decades earlier. He was traveling by steamship from his native India to England. He had calculated the maximum mass of white dwarf stars. By the time the Nobel Committee caught up with him, he had written an armful of books filled with mathematical formulas describing the order of the universe, and he had broken new cosmic ground with his theory on black holes in space. Even so, he says it may be too early to conclude he is a great scientist.
Do you judge a scientist by a great discovery he made? Or do you judge a scientist by his strength, mental strength to go on? I mean, these are all different questions. And unfortunately, it seems to me that, particularly in this century, the emphasis is on discoveries. I mean, but what do you do with it? I mean, suppose you make a great discovery. Do you live all your life thinking of that moment? I mean, this can be very tragic.
Chandrasekhar's desk is covered with pages of his mathematical observations about the universe. You might ask, what is it that he is trying to discover? How does he decide what to study? His answer is that he studies what suits his tastes and his interests.
I do science not to solve this problem or that problem, but to paint something or have a sculpture which makes sense as a whole.
In recent years, Chandra has expanded his scientific horizons to include art and literature. In the most recent book on the mathematical theory of black holes, he begins with a quote from Shakespeare. He believes strongly that the best scientists view the world the way artists do.
I recently gave a lecture on the series paintings of Claude Monet and the landscape of relativity. And there you see Monet took certain specific objects, like the haystacks or the poplars, and painted many, many versions of it, all different, thinking or believing that as a group it gives you a better impression of the haystacks or the poplars than just one single version of it. Well, in my work in recent years, there have been certain immutable objects like the haystacks or the poplars, and they provide me the possibility of doing many, many things which are many, many different aspects.
It has been a decade since Chandrasekhar became the University of Chicago's 52nd Nobel laureate. In that interval, at an age when most people would be pleased to retire, he has continued to work every day, promptly at 8:30. Behind his closed door, a new quest, not for a higher-level discovery of the cosmos, but rather for a fresh understanding of one of the fathers of physics, Sir Isaac Newton. Chandrasekhar is analyzing Newton's Principia, line by line, and discovering new meaning in those ancient words.
I'm writing a book on the Principia, pointing out all the different things which are new to me. I don't see how anyone, at least any normal person, can come to a stage when he can say, I have accomplished what I want to do.
Chandrasekhar looks to the future. He does not dwell on the past. Some of his memories are not pleasant.
As an immigrant from a far-off land, the association of this award with the name of the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, has for me and my wife a special meaning which I hope you can understand. Even at the time I came to this country, in 1936, I could see prejudices against me all the time. I could go to a hotel and the man would say no place, even when I have a reserved place, and so on. Not that these particular incidents affect you personally, but retrospectively, and even during that time, one is always aware that the kind of ideals which Lincoln preached is the one which should eventually be the standard for all peoples everywhere.
In his life, Chandrasekhar has been persistent and patient. He is also increasingly philosophical.
When you look at the way the world is today, what kind of a future do you think we have as a people?
Well, I'm sure that everybody finds it depressing. I mean, no matter where you turn, I mean, you have inhumanity. I mean, one sees it in large and one sees it in small. The newspapers are full of it every day. And the only thing I assure myself is, well, I won't be here.
Governor Edgar, I ask that Marshal Berman, a regent, read the citation for Dr. Lester E. Fisher.
Born in Chicago and educated at Iowa State University, Lester Fisher joined the animal care staff at Northwestern University's medical school after completing his World War II military service. There he met Marlin Perkins, the legendary director of the Lincoln Park Zoo, who persuaded young Dr. Fisher to become a part-time veterinarian at the zoo. Thus started a 45-year relationship during which Dr. Fisher helped rewrite the history books for Lincoln Park and zoos everywhere. Governor Edgar, on behalf of Bushman, Sinbad, and Otto, and on behalf of the 4 million people a year who visit or jog through Lincoln Park Zoo, it is my privilege to present to you, as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy, Dr. Lester E. Fisher.
It was called Ark in the Park, and considering the Lincoln Park Zoo's role in preserving dozens of species, the name was prophetic. Lester Fisher used these moments of TV stardom to educate.
This stuff here, this hay is really a rough material. You know, it's far from a finished food material. So that inside the cow's digestive organs, this is broken down into food the same way, well, I suppose when we eat lettuce or spinach or something else. And Ray,
these are becoming very popular.
To me, this concept of having something in the house that's live and growing and lets people in a big city relate to natural things, I think this is, as you say, such a nice feeling. It's sort of soft and satisfying.
On camera, Lester Fisher showed us how to make terrariums for our homes. Behind the scenes, over a period of 30 years, he transformed Lincoln Park Zoo for the benefit of the entire city.
We were a classic case of a wonderful old zoo, 50 to 100-year-old buildings. The idea was to show animals. People came down and looked at a diversity of a collection and thought they're interesting, they're unusual, so be it. And we didn't give much thought to the concern if for any reason one of them were to sadly die, there were others in the wild that we could go out and get and replace them. Now it's all different. Now we have a very strong moral commitment to care for these animals. We have to give them the best possible home we can. We're trying to breed them in captivity because we no longer want to take animals from the wild. And we want people to learn all they can.
Lester Fisher first started working for the zoo in 1948 as a part-time veterinarian, 1 day a week for 15 years. before being named director. To take the job, he had to give up a nice suburban pet practice in Berwyn. As he tells the story, his zoo career was almost an accident.
Even going to veterinary school, you might say, was a little bit of an accident because, first of all, I wasn't sure I wanted to be an animal doctor. I thought I did. So I did some pre-veterinary work out at Iowa State and thought about it, got accepted in vet school, so that was fortuitous. Ending up in the Army during World War II, I always thought I'd love to go see the Pacific. I'd never been west of the Mississippi River other than going to college, and I ended up in Europe. Again, I had a lot of fun experiences. One day the colonel, when I was in France, said, "Fisher, what do you know about pigeons?" And I said, "Nothing, sir. Why?" He said, "Well, there's a signal pigeon company down the road there a bit. It's got 6,000 birds, and from now on, you're responsible for their health." So I, who didn't know how to hold one without ruffling its feathers, thought, my goodness, what am I going to do? So things do happen. I actually was privileged to see Willie, Patton's dog. That was kind of a nice thing. I got to see much of Europe under duress at times, but I was fortunate, came through fine.
Lincoln Park Zoo is one of the oldest zoos in the United States. It first opened its doors in 1886. It's also one of the smallest, only 35 acres. It is not designed to have an extensive collection of animals, but it does nurture several hundred species, and it's part of a survival program for 26 species that are virtually extinct in the wild. In Lester Fisher's time, the zoo has changed both its look and its outlook.
The animals were in the classic old barred cement cages. The idea was to show an animal. The idea was to build a space for that animal that could be easily cleaned, and perhaps you minimized disease. And somehow people didn't feel too badly about it 50 years ago. I felt very badly that these animals are not in a proper home. And so our goal has been to take the animals out of jail, if you will, and create some spaces that are proper for them.
Among zookeepers, Lester Fisher has made perhaps the greatest difference in the preservation of the great apes. The zoo's first baby gorilla was born in 1970, and there have been scores since.
Bushman, Otto, Sinbad. I guess I'm possibly one of the few zoo directors that have had all three of these big great apes walk out of their cages at some time in their life. And I assure you, those aren't fun calls when someone says, Sinbad's out, Otto's gone over the wall, Bushman's walking around the corridors. Happily, all three of these events ended successfully. Bushman, I think, set a stage here in Chicago. People sort of took him to heart. He was here for 20 years, 1931 to 1951. He was one of the best of the gorillas ever in captivity. Otto has an interesting history in the sense that he's named after our past governor, Otto Kerner. Sinbad was a worthy successor, too, to these names and these wonderful big male gorillas, and he was an important part of our collection for about 38 years. Contrary to the public misconception about gorillas, they're not the King Kong type. They're marvelous, family-oriented animals, live with their troops, and just are fun to be around, and I always thought I was privileged to be able to work with these animals because they are so special.
Largely because of Lester Fisher's program, Lincoln Park Zoo is the resource for successful gorilla breeding programs around the world. He has made Chicago the gorilla capital. Home for the zoo's gorillas is this modernistic facility. It is not a natural-looking habitat, but it is very functional. It is designed to provide mental stimulation.
The architects and I had a lot of discussion. Do we want to simulate an environment, or do we want to just give the animals the biological tools they needed? And so we created a space, we gave it a lot of height. Instead of building a beautiful artificial tree, we put in the climbing materials that they need and use, and it works. The nice thing is that aesthetically it's not as pleasing as the new monkey house, the primate house we've renovated. It's not like the lion house where we've created some of these beautiful environments. But it's there and it works. And I'm not sure to the animal whether a pipe or an artificial tree make much difference. Who is to say?
As director, Lester Fisher became skilled at attracting corporate philanthropy. During his leadership, the zoo attracted more than $50 million for improvements to 16 buildings for the benefit of the animals and zoo-goers. And he's kept the doors open without charge. Unlike most zoos in the United States, the Lincoln Park Zoo is still free.
This is a very special place, and everything I say, of course, I say with honest personal bias, Mike. But I don't know of anywhere else in metropolitan Chicago that you can have kind of a happy, neutral place where all people come on a nice Sunday afternoon, say 1 o'clock when our crowd peaks. You'll have tens of thousands of people here. And we have one policeman. And it's because people come here with a positive mindset. I've tried over the years to have everyone feel it's their zoo, because it is.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. Will Richard Hunt please come forward? Governor Edgar, I ask that the citation for Richard Hunt be read by Mrs. Robert Malott, the Regent.
As a youngster growing up in the woodland community, his interests and talents in art prompted his mother to enroll him in the Junior School of the Art Institute of Chicago at the age of 13. His works have been exhibited in over 50 one-man shows, and his public sculptures rest like metallic jewels in the cities across the United States. Governor Edgar, it is an honor and a great pleasure to present Richard Hunt to be a laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois.
We could weld maybe a point of that up there.
Right, sure.
And that might take care of it.
The deadline approaches in Richard Hunt's studio. His newest work, this 15-foot-tall bronze sculpture called Nature's Palette, is scheduled to be unveiled in Michigan in only 2 weeks. The master himself climbs the scaffolding with his assistants to finish the job. When it's completed, Nature's Palette will add up to more than 70 of Richard Hunt's sculptures on display in public places throughout North America.
I consider sculpture, say, the art of form and space. A lot of people think of sculpture as just making forms, but in the work that I do, the way the forms either occupy or interact with space is an important aspect of it. Furthermore, there's this blending of the sort of technique and imagination. As my work has evolved, mostly in direct metal, the studio looks as much like a metal fabricating shop to people who work with metal as it would as a sculpture studio.
This sculpture is one Richard Hunt says is one of his favorites. It sits on the corner of a neighborhood park just a block from his studio. It links his love of sculpting with his respect for a famous Illinois governor, John Peter Altgeld, and for another son of Illinois, the poet Vachel Lindsay, who memorialized Governor Altgeld in verse. The result is more than form. It is also meaning. It is what Richard Hunt calls public sculpture.
It seemed like a kind of Illinois team then, that a sculptor would come along and be inspired by the poem, The Eagle That Is Forgotten, to create eagle columns, which celebrated John Peter Altgeld. So it provided a focus, for this newly created park in the community and a kind of landmark of a sort. It celebrated a figure who'd been active in the community and the state, and it also, related then again to another art form, brought that into kind of as a catalyst for the creation of another artwork.
Virtually every one of Richard Hunt's projects begins here in the basement of his studio. His raw materials, his imagination, and wax. Here, using a hot iron to weld the wax together, he creates desktop models of the forms that will later be converted into his towering arcs of steel or bronze. He creates scale models not only of his work, but of how it will be displayed. When he is commissioned to make art, it will be on display for decades, if not centuries. Everything must be right. Later, upstairs on the floor of his studio, he makes cardboard templates his assistants use to cut the flat metal into the pieces that are his three-dimensional puzzle. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work.
A lot of work goes into it. I mean, there's everything from presentations and meetings where you argue over concepts and budgets and all of that. There's all the things about getting, interacting with contractors, architects, you know, whatever it takes to get something sort of built, really.
Richard Hunt truly loves his public sculptures, but he also admits that someday, maybe if he retires, he'd like to make the art he has not had the time to create. He is famous, but far from finished. And what about being famous? Well, he has some advice.
I'd say, don't think about being famous one day. You know, figure out something that you really want to do, that you're willing to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, you know, that seems worth putting a lot of work into. And that hopefully, you know, that you can enjoy doing too. I mean, you know, to do something to be famous or rich, it seems to me not the way to go about it. Just that is not fulfilling ultimately, I don't feel. I think it's the ability to take pleasure in what you do that ultimately will satisfy you. And if you get famous, that's the icing on the cake. But if you don't, at least you have the cake.
It is not the arts alone that rely on corporate largesse. So do the schools and churches and human service agencies, the groups that define the fabric of our society as they educate and guide and support. What they need is help from heavily leveraged individuals. For decades, they've been getting that from a Chicago CEO who can literally make a few phone calls, ask for millions of dollars for good causes, and get it from other friends in high places. He won't even guess how many millions.
James J. O'Connor, citizen of Illinois, husband, father, chairman of the board, and chief executive officer of Commonwealth Edison Company, has been elected a Lincoln Laureate in recognition of his outstanding contributions and personal dedication to the improvement of the quality of life of the citizens of the state of Illinois.
Well, I think the circumstances for the head of a utility may be a little bit different from your ordinary company. We're chartered to do business in northern Illinois. This is where we are. If the environment here isn't good for business, we can't pick up our lines and generating plants and move to Tennessee or to Kentucky. We're here, and that poses a very special obligation, I think, on the chief executive officer as well as on the people of the company to try to make this just as good an area as it can possibly be. Now, part of that is selfish. I don't want to say it's all altruistic. It's important that the area that we operate in be strong, be economically strong, be culturally strong, and that we have the amenities and quality of life that we would like to have that will improve our business.
James O'Connor and his company make the headlines when there's a crisis. Like during Chicago's historic Loop flood in 1992, his employees were everywhere. Even O'Connor himself made a presentation at a news conference to share some of the credit for maintaining or restoring electrical service to critical businesses. What lies behind the headlines is another story about a business leader personally committed to social service. One of his favorite interests, the Catholic schools of Chicago. He has been their chief fundraiser for more than a half-decade.
I felt it was very important as an individual to try to perpetuate that quality of education that is provided in the inner city schools. Thus far, we've been successful in raising about $35 million, and that has been used for scholarship assistance for children who otherwise would not be able to attend. It's been used to provide energy-efficient windows, to do things that needed to be done in these schools, many of which are 60 or 70 years old. It's been used to help subsidize teachers, salaries which are very low in that school system. But the most important test is what is it doing for the children? And it's helping them to succeed in an area where oftentimes the odds are very long against success.
O'Connor grew up on the southwest side of Chicago and chose to return to the city after college at Harvard and Georgetown University and a stint in the Air Force. Among the dozens of civic organizations in which he is active, the Chicago Urban League.
I've always admired the leadership that they've had at the Urban League. The gentleman that I kind of matriculated under, Bill Berry, was one of my mentors, and since then one of my best friends is Jim Compton, who's run the Urban League for the last 20 years plus. And it's important in a community as diverse as Chicago that we have an institution like that, which is not just a sounding board, but is a voice of reason when occasionally things can tend to get out of control. So I think they play a major role, and I'm proud of my association with them.
James O'Connor is boss for about 19,000 people. He says his policy, supported by his company, is that everybody find a way to give back to the community.
It's a tradition that we've tried to carry on through to today, and encouraging our younger people coming up in the organization to get involved. We don't often tell our people where they should get involved, whether it's a hospital or a school board or a youth service agency. But we do ask them to find something where they can make a difference and to get involved, and we as a company will try to support that activity and support those individuals. We have come a very long way in the past 130 years, but we have so much further to go. And in the face of the massive problems that confront us today, can we afford to be complacent? Is it enough simply to recite the statistics of poverty and prejudice and their deadly effects on the lives of millions of Americans? Can we leave the task of healing to our elected political leaders and the clergy alone? I think not if anywhere in our hearts we believe that dignity and equality remain the indispensable trademark of a free people, and that these elements are essential to the achievement of the American dream for all people. Thank you very much.
With the final award, this year's Lincoln Academy Convocation brought the list of laureates to nearly 200 since the first ceremony in 1965. Among the first laureates back then was broadcast pioneer Ward Quall.
I think it was a thing that had to be done in this state. I regard this as a special state. When I learned that evening that no other state had done this, I realized, Mike, that we were really blazing a trail. We had some great people at that first group, and I was the youngster in the group, so I was especially appreciative. I didn't feel I deserved it, but I was grateful for the opportunity of being there and pleased that in my humble efforts in broadcasting, I'd been recognized in this manner.
Since then, in ceremonies all over the state, the Academy has honored some of the best-known names in politics and government, entertainment, civil rights, athletics, religion, and academe. By their achievements in the past, they all stand as models for the future of Illinois.
I confess that some mornings my workday, beginning at 3:30, starts a little earlier than I can comfortably enjoy. I wonder if it would be all right if I could be allowed to display this somewhere near my alarm clock, so that on those gray mornings I can look at it and remember this evening and remember you and be re-inspired.
This award is given because of love and understanding and caring and sharing for your fellow man. Then I receive it with a great deal of pride, because that's what I've tried to give to people that come in contact with me.
The annual convocation is held each spring in ceremonies which have become quite large. This convocation filled the Rockefeller Chapel at the University of Chicago. Among the honorees, Admiral James Stockdale, the highest-ranking Navy prisoner of war in Hanoi during the Vietnam War. Admiral Stockdale said his hometown experiences in Abingdon, Illinois, near Galesburg, were part of what kept him alive during 8 years as a POW.
So tonight, I say, as I said to myself dozens of times, as I lay on that rotting prison straw in the Wallow prison in downtown Hanoi, bless you, farm, bless you, little town, bless you, Illinois, for being part of my life. I'm deeply honored to be a laureate of the Lincoln Academy. Thank you.
During the same convocation, the Academy honored an adopted son of Illinois, Broadway singer William Warfield. Born in Arkansas, he came to our state as a professor of music at the University of Illinois.
Oh, yes, I have sung and people have applauded, and I have sung Old Man River, I've done Porgy and Bess and all of that. But I had a feeling when I heard these youngsters singing back to me and realizing that it was a part of my effort, that I was then really contributing to passing on my art to the world.
In 1975, in its 10th anniversary year, the Lincoln Academy expanded its efforts with the Student Laureate Award program. Inspired by Laureate Geraldine Freund, the Student Awards honor outstanding seniors from each of the 4-year degree awarding institutions in Illinois. The Student Convocation is held every year in the House of Representatives in the Capitol in Springfield.
An improved educational system provides the key to solving the problems of today and of the future. Today's youths are tomorrow's leaders. I have faith that we will, in the spirit of Lincoln, use our talents to our fullest potentials in our ever-changing world. Thank you.
Through the years, as the Lincoln Academy selects its laureates and its student laureates, it stands for a powerful principle that excellence deserves recognition as a standard for us all. Laureate Hugh Downs put it this way.
The eventual stagnation of any orthodoxy calls automatically for innovative thought. And just as innovative thought can be stifled and thwarted by peer disapproval, so can it be encouraged by community recognition and the acknowledgement that intrinsic and universal values are to be cherished. This is what the Lincoln Academy is all about.
Through the years, the Lincoln Academy of Illinois has created a legacy of excellence with an underlying belief that if some can do it, many can.
They must change their attitudes, certainly the attitudes that I've seen demonstrated in a number of ways, and in a number of places. They must be taken charge of by their parents and started feeling responsible for their actions.
If someone tells me they want me to be in charge of a campaign, to do anything, I say, how are you going to measure my performance in that? And then they tell me. Then I say, well, what's the best that's ever been done in that? And then I know exactly what I want to do. It's not very hard after that. But you'd be surprised how many people can make work and fidget around and discuss and get involved in arguments and lose sight of what the objective is. But never start to undertake anything without having an objective and make sure it's the right objective.
But science at a later stage should not be a solution of problems. It should be an effort to understand the whole area. So what you're interested in is not for that own thing per se, but as that particular thing as a part of a larger whole. And it is only when you develop science that way, at least it seems to me, that science becomes more than problem solving. It becomes, in some sense, a satisfaction for your own concepts and your own beliefs.
I think I'd tell a young person that education is always, of course, one of the keys. One has to have some foundation for doing things. I think commitment. I think one has to care. Even something as basic as getting a job at this zoo. Many people say, oh, I love animals, I want to work at a zoo. But there aren't that many openings. The opportunities are limited. So I feel strongly that those that want to do it bad enough, they're the ones that are going to end up working here and being with us.
One certainly has to be able to work hard at whatever it is you want to be excellent in. Devote whatever time, energy it takes and be willing to try, and if you don't succeed, to try again. There's this process of overcoming failure, mediocrity, whatever, to achieve excellence. And it's not something that you achieve in the first instance. So it is a process, really.
I found over time that it's amazing how much better people perform if they're expected to perform better. If you are willing to accept mediocrity, that's the best you're going to get. If you're expecting excellence, chances are you will get that. And I think it's important to encourage people to try to set their standard, set that bar at a very high level.
Excellence is one of the most elusive goals we can set for ourselves. It is at least a balance of desire and ability and achievement. The Lincoln Laureates have demonstrated that balance in a special way. While they might enjoy success as individuals, they've also contributed to the quality of life for all of us. They are a reminder to us all that Illinois, the land of Lincoln, is fertile ground for excellence.